Today's talk focuses on three primary topics and then our usual follow-up on what's going on with Tesla over the last week. The first item we cover is the fact that there's an oops when it comes to Bob Lutz and his prediction of the Tesla demise within the next year, and that's all related to where we are with batteries and how some of the large companies that they've been discussing are performing. The second thing we cover today is something that we call Truckee and the Continental to Divide scare the Tesla Semi. I think you guys will find this interesting as an update on where we're at. And then the third thing that we cover today is what I call battery validation for Tesla from its latest competitor in the form of a former Tesla executive. And then, as you know, we tend to, the last time I was going to cover today is we're trying to deconstruct some of the losses that were highlighted in the last earnings announcement that affected the capital raise. So there's a number of things we're kind of covering today, and we look forward to you guys asking any questions that come to mind, because we definitely want to shed better light on the company as usual. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. For those who are Patreon supporters, thank you for your support. Same for the folks who are subscribers. We are about to start delivering our content for subscribers only, and we'd love to have you participate in that as well. So this has been an interesting period for Tesla and the company and where things are going. I wanted to note that one of my fun elements of this show has been to take a look at the predictions of Bob Lutz and then deconstruct them, because even though Bob Lutz is speaking, many people in the auto industry feel as though these items are critical sort of underpinnings of competitive strategy that are going on versus Tesla. So the part I wanted to look at today is the fact that it was announced that the folks at Bob was very proud of the fact that there had been at least, let's say, 20 cars per company announced between GM and all three major German manufacturers, BMW, Daimler, and VW. And so each of those entities had about 20 vehicles announced. The production was supposed to be starting to really climb into Tesla's shorts next year in early 2020 and then get greater over time. Now, the reason I say oops on a Tesla death is quite simple. The bottom line is that in the case of VW, they've announced that their e-tron will arrive in 2024 in large numbers. So if you recall the Super Bowl ad that was had, they referenced the e-tron coming at that point. We also have an issue with something called the EQ from Daimler-Benz. And so another data point that popped up was that it was stated that because of a shortage of batteries, there would not be an introduction of the e-tron in the United States until the beginning of 2020 versus 2019. And that seemed kind of strange to me, but I think it reflects predicted demise for Tesla that simply has not occurred. And the arguments that being made when slowdowns occur, I just found it fascinating, because these arguments don't seem to be holding up very well long term, but they keep being rolled out by the large competitors. And I think what it really shows is that the process of getting to scale in electric vehicles is difficult. Another bit of, I want to say, Bob Lutzian data that came out is that thank you for my furry mic comment. It allows us to stop the wind noise from affecting sound. So, and it also needs to be positioned for good sound quality for our listeners. I wanted to note that in general, what's going on right now is that it was just announced that VW has a new vehicle coming out that's going to come in at about the 30,000 euro number. And I believe that the platform for this vehicle is going to be the same that the e-tron and the Taycan are using, but they're trying to target the lower price point, in this case, probably with a smaller battery pack. Now, what's fascinating about this is that it was announced that they had 10,000 people who have put in reservations for this vehicle. And I think that's great that they have 10,000 people that are reserving. What I'm kind of surprised by is why bother announce it when Tesla is selling about 10,000 cars a month, at least. And then we're also seeing BYD in China as a top EV seller there. And they're at that 10,000 a month level at least as well, if not a higher number. So this brings up the fact that there are sales occurring for competitive entities, but frankly, we're just not seeing the sales volume that they had hoped to make them excellent Tesla competitors. And I'd say it's not a shocker because there are a lot of variables that it takes to be a successful EV producer. And there are issues like the number of batteries available. There are issues like, are the battery packs working, etc. And all these are variables that are influencing the degree to which this can be successful. Hence why I'm saying that the GM Lutz death of Tesla is on the oops plan right now, because it looks like they're going to need a couple, maybe 3 more years before they can really close the gap on outperforming Tesla in this space. The next thing that we wanted to dive into is there's a place in California called Truckee, California. So if you look at your map, I know about half of our viewers are California based, so it's no big deal to know where this is. For those of you who are not, it might be worth looking at the map. Truckee, California is one of the most famous places in California because there was actually something called the Donner Party. And the Donner Party was a wagon train back in the 1800s that left too late from Utah heading over those mountains. And when they got to a place called Truckee, California, there was a huge issue there because there was supposedly a giant snowstorm, there was 40 feet of snow, and because they couldn't get through that mountain pass efficiently, most of the party died, with cannibalizing starting to show up as a method for those who did survive. So it was kind of an ugly situation. I bring this up relative to the Tesla Semi because if you want to know where the Tesla Semi is going to be, one of the methods you can use is to simply type into your computer average temperature for that day, high and low, for Truckee, California, because what that temperature is determines whether the Tesla Semi is being run between the Fremont plant and the Gigafactory that's been built in Reno. So in essence, what's happening is that if that temperature is well above 32 degrees in that 50 degree on average zone, those trucks will be running through those mountains. If that number is lower than that, they will not be running because the additional energy it takes to cross the mountains, combined with the impact of the battery trying to warm itself from below freezing, means that the truck likely does not make it through those mountains, even though the distance is only about 100 miles for it to cross from one charging station to make it over to the Gigafactory. So the other part that's going on right now, I just saw a comment where someone was talking about the Tesla Semi should come to DC. In the case of the Donner Summit, you'll notice that it's only 7,500 feet going up. So the other thing that's going on is there's something called the Continental Divide. So the first set of mountains that have to be dealt with is the Sierra Nevada. The second set of mountains is in Colorado in the Continental Divide, and their elevation is 13,000 feet. So again, for those semis to start making the run, or the semi that's the longer battery, is the second set of mountains that we have to deal with is what is the average temperature going over the Continental Divide, in particular in the Roosevelt Tunnel, because again, that battery needs to warm itself for best operating temperatures, and if we're not successfully above that freezing zone, that's a lot of energy consumed in just battery warming to make it viable. So this is why we're saying that the Tesla Semi is a little bit scared. And so what we're forecasting, and you can go backwards and see this last year when the truck was making runs into Iowa, into Arkansas and other places, you'll notice that there's an interesting circumstance going on, which is the truck never goes up into those mountains in the winter. So you'll notice that the photo we're going to include is a picture of two trucks together actually hauling freight, and they are at the Gigafactory in Reno, and they've driven there from either Los Angeles. What I thought is more in line is not just from Los Angeles, it's actually those trucks were rolling over from the Fremont plant, because the home of the truck seems to be someplace in Sunnyvale, California, which is where they're storing when those vehicles are not being stored in Los Angeles. So over the next month or so, we expect to see more trips between Fremont and Reno. And then for those of you on the East Coast, particularly that are large buyers, I wanted to note that there's an interesting circumstance happening, because one of the largest buyers of trucks has been Walmart, and Walmart, from what we've seen, hasn't had their opportunity to drive the truck and have it visit Bentonville, Arkansas yet. So that's probably the number one destination that we're expecting an extended visit by the truck, as well as the FedEx headquarters in Memphis. So when will this occur? I think the snow should be gone in Denver, or the Denver mountains, by the end of May, perhaps early June. So we're expecting the Semi to start making introductions to new buyers, possibly even as far away as Canada, by midsummer. And the slowdown of this might be if we're showing average temperatures too low in some of those mountain passes that the Semi has to cross into. So stay tuned. Stay tuned on the Semi. We look forward to it moving around the country and more people being able to see it in action, but do not expect it to happen with the Truckee threat as well as the continental divide threat that we just discussed. The next thing that we wanted to dive into is that there's an interesting problem that's popped up and a question from Tesla which has not been answered, but we just got a partial answer. So for those of you who are involved in real estate, for example, you own a home, you should note that there's an interesting phenomenon, which is something called the 2% rule. What the 2% rule means is that each year you're supposed to put away 2% of the value of the home in what's called deferred maintenance. So what happens here is that you may or may not see a roof being replaced or other items within the home that need to be repaired, but eventually that spending has to be done to maintain that entity. In this case, what we wanted to note is that there's a Forbes article that discussed the challenges Tesla had with the amount of money raised relative to some of the things that need to be paid for by the company that pretty much consumes most of that capital. One of them that we're comfortable discussing is something called deferred maintenance. In the case of Tesla, they're supposed to be doing about $800 million a year worth of maintenance on all of their factories. The number that was actually done is about $300 million. So there's about a $500 million underspending process that's occurred. So what I want to note from this is the fact that by reduced spending having occurred, we have the situation where other problems can pop up. For example, note the fires that you've heard about happening at the Fremont plant in the paint shop over the last year. So I kind of wanted to bring these up because the issue that's popping up is that deferred maintenance can create other problems that slow down your production process, hence why I wanted to review what's going on in this space. So I'm very comfortable discussing the fact that it was also highlighted that the factory was built in 1961. So yes, Tesla retrofitted it to its needs when it started doing production approximately 10 years ago, but they have been expanding it to some extent, but there's also routine maintenance that's needed there and at the other production facilities Tesla has. So this is noteworthy because it starts to show how and why you can have the losses that Tesla incurred despite the fact that revenue is increasing with the Model 3 sales. The last sort of area that we wanted to sort of dive into is what I call battery validation. So one of the lurking questions about sort of where things are with Tesla versus competitors is, will Tesla's battery techniques win out versus the pouch solutions that are being offered by competitors? So it turns out that a former battery executive at Tesla is now CEO of a competing firm, and in their case, they've elected to use pretty much, from what we can tell, the 2170 configuration that Tesla developed to deliver their battery products as they produce EVs. So I believe that this is noteworthy because all of a sudden you now have new companies entering the Tesla process of production, and it suggests that the Tesla process is perhaps a better solution than what the Korean manufacturers have come up with in pouches to get power to those EVs. Those, as we all know, those cylindrical batteries are more expensive, both for the cost of metal, and they also weigh more because they are no longer, the pouches are not the case. So I think this is awesome to see further validation of Tesla's choices here, and I think that it'll be interesting to see if and how competitors acquiesce and start climbing aboard the Tesla bandwagon of process in order to deliver batteries so they can be competitive going forward. I saw a comment regarding Maxwell and its impact on Tesla's battery production. My thought on that is that I believe that Maxwell will have some influence. I think at the front end it may just be in the form of new engineers and scientists who bring their expertise over and then eventually starting to bake their solutions into what Tesla does in the battery space. I have to admit that in order for Tesla to do something significant in the Maxwell space, perhaps graphene or a big transition that results in way lower costs and a different method of producing batteries, I don't think that shows up for 1 or 2 years, because you have to define the solution and then build a factory at scale to deliver batteries to be installed in vehicles. And my assessment of that is that that will occur. It has not occurred yet, and so therefore I just feel like it's a good thing to have more techniques when it comes to batteries, but the reality is that has not arrived yet. And will it arrive? There's constant change, there's constant updates, and I think it's good that Tesla is staying ahead of the game rather than resting on their laurels, expecting things to work out with what their current solution is. The only thing that we wanted to cover today is just a reminder that there's an interesting phenomenon happen. As you notice, Tesla's stock price is rotating into that 250 realm. We think that what's going to happen is that as it's defined, that Tesla has been able to deliver vehicles at a price point that fits demand, particularly in Europe. I think that's when we'll be able to see a nice bump in sales. And so I actually believe that, Tesla loses money on the 35K vehicle, so therefore something like a $45,000 US priced vehicle, when shipped in large quantities to China as well as Asia, is when we'll see a nice stabilization of sales. In addition, I think that the leasing opportunities people have now will also start making a dent in reducing the inventory that Tesla has. The only unfortunate thing is that it seems like the inventory that's in large quantity is primarily at the highest price point. So even if you do lease it, a lease price on an $80,000 car is likely to be about the same as a monthly payment on a $35,000 car. So again, once leases are in effect in large quantities for a 45K car, I believe that's kind of the zone where we'll see huge amounts of sales occurring, and therefore, the company doing a lot better than it is currently with the throughput of sales and how that affects earnings. Let's also recognize that there's also a drag going on because Tesla's solar hasn't received the adoption that Elon expected. So they've gone from about 30% market share to 9%. So at that lower number, there's been some heavy discounting to try to move units, but there starts to be a question mark on whether or not that division is going to get shut down, because as you go to a lower and lower percentage market share, it means the losses you're taking there, you've got to figure out whether or not you can have big enough throughput for your operations to make those numbers work. So, at any rate, I noticed Roger and Donovan and others that are taking time out to review, the Maxwell impact. When it comes to Maxwell, I'm from Missouri. We get a lot of questions about it. We haven't seen any significant impact that it's having, but we're hopeful that it does, because I think it just adds to Tesla's advantages as to why they're able to deliver solutions that customers really want. Terrific. At any rate, I wanted to note to you guys I'm about to do my 20 leg lifts that we've discussed in previous shows. Wanted to encourage you to avoid any more or fried foods any more than once a week. I'd also like to note that we look forward to any health tips all of you may have for our viewers, and topics you'd like covered are also of interest, so please feel free to share. Again, please take time to like and subscribe. We could use your help on Patreon to support the growth of our channel. Wanted to say hello to Roger, Josh, Jumping Peter from UAE. I wanted to thank all of you. Buck, thanks for visiting us. Want to thank all of you for taking time out to join us. We look forward to chipping ideas in that can help the company be more successful, as well as have more of an impact on the reduction of our carbon footprint all over. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, Max gut, German. Au revoir, French, Lehitrot, Hebrew, Hoda, Hafez, Farsi, Ni hao ma, Chinese, it's a hello, Zdravstvuyte, Russian, and in Jamaica we say, enough respect, walk good man. Brother Donovan, have a great day, and thanks once again for joining us. We look forward to visiting with you on our next show.